I really live every day like it's my last. In an odd kind of way, being at risk is a gift. I'm so blessed to have today, and I hope my joy reflects that.
My name is April Hines. I'm from Philadelphia, outside of Philadelphia. My family and I live in Washington Crossing, PA. My grandfather, Scotty, Robert Strang, was born in Scotland, and he came over to the United States with his mother and his family around 1923. When he was digging for what I believe was probably a trench for piping, his shovel curiously clanked against something, and he reached down and pulled it up out of the ground, turned it around, and here was this face glaring back at him. And not having any idea what on earth it was, he showed it to his foreman and a couple of his guys, and they said, "Oh, maybe it's a piece of Indian pottery. It might be worth something. Just take it home, Scotty." So he did. After my father passed away, my mother, my brother, and I moved in with Scotty and my grandmother, who was passing away from Huntington's disease. My ancestors have been in bondage to a genetic disease called Huntington's that has affected, as far as we can go back to the 1800s, every single generation of my family. It's a terrible disease. It takes away everything that you are. It's a neurodegenerative brain disease, so it affects your mind, it affects your ability to walk and talk, eventually leading to an early demise. So it was very difficult growing up to watch my grandmother deteriorate. It was very devastating to find out that my mother inherited the gene, and then shortly, a few months later, we realized my aunt had inherited the gene. And it looms over you because you know the next generation may inherit it, which is a 50-50 chance for every child that has a parent with Huntington's. One particular day, I had the difficult task of moving my mother and my aunt into a nursing home. I had pulled out this brochure that I had gotten from In Touch magazine, and it was a story about a group of Africans that were overcoming insurmountable hardships during what was a very brutal and violent civil war. And the people of this particular village were being bombed, and their children were being killed, but yet they could come out the next day and get up and rejoice. And they were talking about singing these songs of praise, even through what seemed like, the worst of storms. And I so related to it that I marked it up and kept it in my Bible. And he had mentioned a Bible verse in this story, and it was 2 Corinthians. And it talked about how the human spirit as human beings were like jars of clay. We're hard-pressed on every side, but not crushed. We're persecuted, but not abandoned. And I clung to that verse and prayed and left for my mother's house that day. My aunt came out and she said, "Oh, there's just one more jug, the one that Scotty found." And, I was too busy wrapping things with bubble wrap. And I looked up and I said, "Oh my gosh, what is that thing? That's what Scotty found?" And she said, "Yes, we don't know what it is." And I said, "Oh my gosh, this is something amazing." I think I was so instantly attracted to it, moved by it, curious. As I began to learn more about it, learn more about the people behind it that enslaved people in the potteries of Edgefield County had influenced it, I just was so moved by it. One day I went over to the jug and I'm looking at it, I'm staring at it, and I'm looking and I'm thinking about enslaved craftsmen. I'm thinking about who were they? Who made this jug? I felt this deep connection with the people that made it, the hands that turned it. I would almost hear, "Find us, tell our stories. Find us, tell our stories." And it was so powerful that I actually made a promise to the jug that I'm going to try to find your person, whether it was the person who made it, the person who brought it up north. I've often thought about the person that sat at that turner's wheel and fashioned my face jug, and what he had intended that jug to be. If knowing the connection with ancestors and the connection and reconnection of those that have departed before us, did he know that this face jug was going to go off? Did he send it off with a sailing mission to bring back all of the forgotten ancestors on the slave ship Wanderer? Because that's what it did. I think I can always have a feeling of relating to a sense of oppression, and in a way bondage is always in the back of your mind. And feeling that bondage, that you can't break from that. There's no cure, there's no treatment. It's oppressive because you try, to get through the next generation. I wasn't quite sure what I was looking for. So Joan and I flew into Edgefield, South Carolina, and we went to the archives. And there we met with Wayne O'Brien, who actually is related to Joan Gardenhire. Wayne handed me a paper of the 1870 census of native-born Africans, and some were highlighted. And I said, oh, okay, great, thanks. Not really sure what the connection was. And he said, well, you know about the Wanderer slave ship bringing in 200 native Africans into the area. And I still didn't really understand the connection. And so I had asked him to photograph a cabin that I saw off of the road going into Edgefield. And he handed me a few business cards, and off I went back to my hotel room, which was the last night I was staying there, and made a few phone calls and got a hold of Fred Morton. And he told me he didn't own a slave cabin. We worked that must have been a mistake. But then I asked him why the historian would have had his phone number. And that's when Fred answered that he was the descendant of the oldest survivor of the Wanderer. And as soon as he said that, I realized that was the story. Those were the people who were calling out to me behind this jug. And so that set me on an amazing journey.